Welcome to a new episode of Platypod Perspectives, where we show you an incredible image like this one, and then we talk with the artist behind it. Who captured this? What went into it? How can you come up with something similar to this? What are the steps? What are the camera settings? What kind of equipment was used? And the guy who did this gorgeous image, his name is Jeff Wiswell, and here he is. Jeff, welcome to Platypod Perspectives.
Hey, Larry, thanks for having me.
So, Jeff, what all went into this image? It's first of all, is it a single exposure? Is it multiple exposures? What time of day? There's no humans in the picture. It seems like a lot of thought went into this production.
Well, so I think you're right. A lot of it was time of day. What I found with previous travel experiences was that getting up early is really the best thing that I can do to get out there. So it's a nice, calm environment. We went to Venice a couple years ago, and we never really adjusted to the time difference for whatever reason. And so we were up at like 4 a.m. We were going to bed at 6 p.m. But the nice thing was that I could be all alone at St. Mark's Square with no people, which is kind of unheard of. And so ever since then, I've really kind of taken that any place that we've gone. So time of day for me is actually probably the most important thing. I use photo pills, obviously a lot of other apps to look that stuff up too, but I try to get there at blue hour. And so I think one of the bigger mistakes people make is when they try to get there at sunrise. And so by the time they've spent 15 or 20 minutes kind of fiddling around with all their stuff, sunrise has already passed. And so I want to get there roughly about a half hour early.
This image is really impressive. You said you were looking for a particular angle. You like the wide angle, and we can obviously see that it's a low angle shot. So what Platypod gear helped you make this happen?
That's a great question. So in this case, I use the Platypod Extreme. You know, when it comes to composition, I really like to show the world in a way that most people don't see it. Most of us are kind of used to having our phones, and we just kind of go around and kind of click like this. But if you see the world at 5.5 or 6 feet for everything in photos, it's never really that interesting, or it takes something so significant for it to be interesting. So I usually like to either shoot really high, so maybe a drone or some higher vantage point somewhere, or in most cases, I default to shooting lows because I think it shows the world in such a profoundly different way, almost kind of like a kid would see it. And so that's where I love having my Platypod, because I can do that so easily. To do it on a tripod, you have to put your tripod out and flip it over and invert it. And by that point, you've like inverted each element so that each element is then upside down. It's so confusing. And so my Platypod is just so much easier to do it.
Not to mention, people don't love tripods in all these different tourist style locations. A lot of times that'll get you attention you don't want.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the tripod police, kind of air quotes the tripod police, they don't really seem to notice when you have your Platypod. And I mean, to a certain extent, that's fair, right? Because it's not a tripod. I mean, ultimately what they're doing is they're trying to keep things safe for people walking by. But it really lets you shoot in places where you might not otherwise be able to. I was able to photograph from the floor in the Vatican, and I really didn't get anything more than a glance with that. And so, when you think about kind of where you can photograph, having a Platypod just makes it so easy. But it does so without me having to make any adjustments to my image. So I can shoot at ISO 100 and shoot for 30 seconds. Whereas if I was going to take that photo somewhere where I just had my tripod and I couldn't take the photo with my tripod, I might be shooting at ISO 4000, 5000, and then having to deal with grain, or shooting at a aperture of 2.8 or something to that extent to get the photo. So the Platypod's great because I don't have to make compromises. In this case, actually, in pretty much all the kind of photography I do like this, I'm taking 3 bracketed exposures. And so what I'm doing is something pretty much anybody can do on any camera now. I take 3 shots. I think I do basically 2 stops in between shots. So basically my neutral shot, and then 2 stops overexposed, 2 stops underexposed. And then I'm really just on the fly so that I can make that happen within the kind of the maximum 30-second timer. I try not to use bulb mode, but if I don't have to, unless I'm doing some really long exposures, what I'll try to aim for is roughly like 8-second or 15-second exposure and a 30-second.
8, 15, and 30-second exposure, and then you blend them in, use Photoshop, Lightroom.
Yeah, so I almost always use Lightroom, and that's what I did in this case. And then I took it into Photoshop to do some more post. One thing that was kind of a happy surprise, I think, in this was some of those rays of light coming off the lights on each side. And so I think I was probably at about f16 or so. I shoot in manual mainly, so that I can have the flexibility. So what I'll try to do is, I'll try to have kind of a happy medium time of exposure as well as aperture. But by shooting at kind of a f16 or so, then we're seeing those rays of light on each side kind of really sparkle.
Yeah, it is a big standout element of your image, but like you were saying, the overexposed and underexposed and the center exposure blended all together just brings together such a completely gorgeous image. Now, one of the other things I noticed is that it seems like the ground is wet. Was it raining just before? Is it an illusion? Is the ground actually wet?
From what I remember, I'm almost positive that I brought some water with me that morning. I knew that the ground had a lot of texture. I did bring a little bit of water, but I didn't water the whole thing. Actually, I don't know if the water helped me as much as I expected it to on this image. But there really wasn't as much of an opportunity for that in this case. What I did here is I did a little bit of a Lightroom trick. I increased the contrast and I increased the clarity. And so I'll try to do that. I'll try to do that sometimes in churches or when there's a little bit of sheen somewhere, because it really brings it up, I think.
Yeah, very, very nice work. So with respect to the gear, what kind of camera do you use? What lens were you using?
So I use Canon. I have the R5 and then the R6 Mark II. I'm almost positive this was an R5. I generally like that for travel landscape just because I have more megapixels, so I can crop in a little bit more too. And then as far as lens choice, this was the 15 to 35 2.8. I really like to go as wide as possible. So I usually use that as more of I would say a 15 millimeter lens in most cases.
Perfect. Excellent. I hope that helps some of our viewers. Jeff, your image is truly fantastic, and it's great that you were able to share with us what all went into capturing this image. If people want to find out more about you, is there a website they can go to? Can they learn from you someplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly check out my Instagram. I've got 2 websites. I do a lot of portrait photography. I've really gotten into that since we had kids. And so I do both kind of professional portraits as well as family documentary type stuff. And that is jlwiswell.com. And then my travel website, where I'm mostly just showing off my images, and that's more of a kind of a personal project, that is jlwiswellcollection.com.
Very good, Jeff. Thank you again so much for spending time with us today. Thank you for sharing the secrets behind this Lisbon image. We really appreciate you being on Platypod Perspectives, Platypod professional who knows what he's doing. I hope you've enjoyed watching and hearing from Jeff on his fantastic image from Lisbon. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And thanks for watching another episode of Platypod Perspectives.